What happens when the front line is no longer the only front under attack? Right now, in Ukraine, war has spilled far beyond the trenches. The entire defense structure, command, logistics, even the rhythms of daily civilian life, is being stretched to its absolute limits. If you imagine a nation as a finely tuned clockwork, every gear, military and civilian, has begun to grind under relentless pressure. This moment is not a mere skirmish, but a test of endurance on a scale few modern societies have faced. Ukrainian command, facing relentless pressure, is making a high-stakes gamble. In a move that borders on desperation, they are deploying their very last reserves to hold the Pokrovsk direction. These are not ordinary reinforcements. They are the final units pulled from the north, leaving once secure flanks dangerously exposed. For many of these units, this is the third or even fourth time they have been shifted to plug gaps elsewhere, a testament to just how overstretched Ukraine's manpower has become. This desperate redistribution creates a lethal imbalance. As fresh Ukrainian troops rush to reinforce one threatened area, other sectors are left with gaps so wide they all but invite attack. Russia is not simply pushing with more soldiers, it is executing a calculated strategy to break Ukraine's backbone. Supply lines are being targeted, infrastructure is being destroyed, and Ukrainian forces are being cornered into impossible choices. This is not just another tactical maneuver. What we are seeing is the emergence of a far more dangerous phase of the conflict, one in which the collapse of logistics could set off a catastrophic chain reaction. The unraveling could reach both the military front and the home front, threatening Ukraine's very capacity to continue fighting at all. The stakes could not be higher. Not just local defeat, but the risk of total breakdown of the entire war effort. Imagine military collapse, economic freefall, and a society teetering on the edge. When war moves beyond the battlefield, it strikes at the very heart of a nation's survival. It is a lesson written not only in Ukraine's present struggle, but also in the cautionary tales of history, when supply chains failed in Stalingrad, when infrastructure collapsed in Yugoslavia, and when cities like Grozny became synonymous with siege and deprivation. But how did Ukraine reach this crisis point, and what does it mean for those living through it? To understand, we have to look at the silent war being waged behind the lines, a contest as vital as any fought with guns and artillery. Why would military leaders risk their entire defense on a single front? In Ukraine's war for survival, the answer is now written at Pokrovsk, a name transformed into the epicenter of crisis. Here, Ukrainian command has made a desperate choice, massing nearly all remaining combat-ready forces in one sector, even if it means stripping vital units from Sumy and Chernihiv in the north. This is no mere tactical shuffle. It is an all-or-nothing gamble, forged under relentless pressure. If Pokrovsk falls, Russian troops could surge westward to Pavlograd, cutting deep into the heart of southeastern defenses. Such a breakthrough would threaten to unravel Ukraine's entire regional line, potentially triggering a cascade of military defeats. Historically, such concentrated gambles have led to dramatic reversals. The fall of Singapore in the Second World War, when British commanders concentrated their defense and left their flanks open, comes to mind. In each case, the result was not a slow defeat, but a sudden and catastrophic collapse. Yet this bold move exacts a punishing cost. By shifting so many troops, Ukraine has dangerously exposed its northern flanks. The regions of Sumy and Chernihiv, now left with only skeleton defenses, are wide open to Russian advances. For Russian commanders, this is an unexpected window, a chance to strike at new targets, disrupt lifelines, and put critical supply corridors at risk. In military history, such unguarded corridors have often spelled doom. Think of the Ardennes in 1940, when German forces bypassed strong defenses to encircle and defeat Allied armies in France. The consequences are already visible. Ukrainian defensive lines have buckled in multiple sectors. Russian forces have seized both Balagany and Kazatskaya, key settlements in the Donetsk region. Even more devastating, the massive Pokrovsk mining enterprise, once the pride of Ukraine's coal industry, has fallen. This is not just a tactical loss. The collapse of this mine snaps crucial production chains, crippling the local economy and delivering a psychological blow to thousands who once depended on its payroll. This is reminiscent of when the Ruhr Valley in Germany was occupied after the First World War, paralyzing the German economy and causing unrest far from the front lines. Now, Russian forces will exploit this resource to fuel their own war machine, while Ukraine loses a pillar of its metallurgical sector, at the very moment it can least endure further shocks. With every lost position, the defenders are stretched thinner. The risk is existential. A collapse at Pokrovsk could mean vast swathes of territory lost, the downfall of critical industries, and a turning point in the war itself. These events echo historical collapses such as the loss of the Donbass during the Russian Civil War, when control over vital coal fields determined the fate of entire armies and regions. Yet for all the drama on the front lines, the true fate of this conflict will be determined as much by what happens behind them, where supply lines, infrastructure, and the silent war of logistics quietly decide the outcome. In modern conflicts, logistics have been called the fifth front, as essential as air, land, sea, and cyber. As the battle for Pokrovsk rages, the struggle to keep Ukraine's lifelines intact grows even more desperate. Every supply truck, rail line, and fuel depot becomes a new front, one where the outcome may prove just as decisive as any clash of armies. During the Allied advance into Germany in the Second World War, for example, the famous Red Ball Express supply route became a vital artery. When it faltered, entire offensives stalled, despite battlefield victories. What if the very roads, rails, and power lines that keep your army fighting and your children warm suddenly begin to fail? Across Ukraine, pressure builds without rest. Russian attacks erupt on multiple fronts, forcing defenders to stretch their thinning reserves ever further. Each new assault forces an impossible choice: hold one vital position or abandon another to the enemy. This is not just a contest for empty fields or shattered houses. Every targeted village, every industrial outpost is a lifeline, a fragile thread in the nation's supply chain. The fall of a coal mine, a rail junction, or a power station ripples far beyond the front, darkening homes and breaking morale. In the First Gulf War, for instance, the destruction of Iraqi command and control centers, far behind the front, helped break the resistance of frontline troops. Recent Russian advances in places like Dobropilya and Kramatorsk have intensified the crisis. Government offices and state institutions evacuate in haste, each retreat leaving another gap in Ukraine's defenses. The chain holding the country together grows weaker with every loss. The pattern is eerily reminiscent of the collapse of Yugoslavia, where the disintegration of infrastructure and administrative control led to cascading violence and hardship far from the initial flashpoints. Nature adds its own weight to the struggle. Autumn rains and endless mud-swallow roads, immobilizing armored vehicles and trapping trucks loaded with food, shells, and medicine. Evacuation convoys stall under empty skies. Now, moving supplies or the wounded is not just hard, it verges on the impossible. The infamous Rasputitsa, the season of mud in Eastern Europe, has long been a bane for armies, from Napoleon's doomed march to Moscow to the stalling of German panzers during Operation Barbarossa. But the greatest peril comes from above. Russian artillery and drones scan the few roads and rails that remain open, waiting to strike at any movement. Each delivery of ammunition, each desperate evacuation, becomes a deadly gamble. This echoes the experience of the British in Burma during the Second World War, when Japanese air superiority made every supply drop an exercise in life-or-death risk. As these arteries are hammered and severed, entire Ukrainian units risk encirclement, isolation, and annihilation. Civilians suffer as well. Lights flicker out, water stops running, hospitals go silent. The collapse of logistics does not just sap military strength, it threatens the survival of entire towns and cities. This is not unlike the fate of besieged Leningrad, where logistics determined whether millions lived or died. With every passing day, the dominoes fall, first at the battered front, then deep behind the lines, as infrastructure is systematically dismantled from the inside out. The slow-motion unraveling is reminiscent of the fall of Saigon, where the collapse of supply lines and the loss of key infrastructure signaled the end, even as some defenders continued to fight. But as the supply lines crumble and the sense of siege deepens, Ukraine must decide how and where to draw its last lines of resistance. The choices ahead will shape not only the outcome of the war, but the very future of the nation. In the past, countries like Finland during the Winter War managed to hold off numerically superior invaders by leveraging local knowledge and resilient logistics. Will Ukraine find similar reserves of ingenuity? How does a modern nation begin to unravel, not in a single moment, but one strike at a time? The answer is revealed not only on the front lines, but in the silent collapse of everything that keeps society moving. Precision Russian strikes are crippling Ukraine's energy grids and railway hubs, plunging entire provinces into darkness, and halting vital troop and supply movements. The consequences are not simply military, they are social and economic as well. The loss of a single locomotive or power substation is not something easily reversed. Each destroyed engine, every shattered switching station, adds a multiplying burden to Ukraine's strained logistics. With each rail asset erased, the entire supply chain groans under the weight, threatening the flow of ammunition, reinforcements, and even food to embattled soldiers. This pattern echoes the Allied bombing campaigns in Germany, where the relentless targeting of railways and power plants sapped the ability of the Third Reich to sustain its war effort. As these military lifelines snap, daily life for civilians spirals into crisis. Rolling blackouts snuff out electricity and water for entire neighborhoods. Hospitals, already overwhelmed by wounded and shortages, are forced to ration care and electricity. Families shiver in unheated apartments, and everywhere anxiety mounts. Because with every passing day, the basics of survival grow more uncertain. In besieged Sarajevo, for example, the breakdown of utilities and supply routes led to years of hardship and trauma. But the fallout is not confined to Ukrainian forces alone. Reports now confirm that foreign military advisors have been killed in these targeted attacks. This is proof that Russia's reach and intent are broader and more strategic than many in the West had imagined. The war's consequences are no longer strictly local, they are international and escalating. When international advisors and aid workers are targeted, it sends a signal to the world that no one is immune from the reach of modern warfare. For months, many hoped that Western-supplied air defenses would shield Ukraine's critical infrastructure from devastation. But a new wave of Russian missile tactics is exposing hard truths. Sophisticated air defense systems, once seen as nearly untouchable, are being outflanked by missiles designed for exactly this challenge. In previous conflicts, such as the Yom Kippur War, advances in missile technology repeatedly upset the balance and forced adversaries to rethink their defensive strategies. These updated Russian weapons include maneuverable ballistic missiles and cruise missiles equipped with cluster warheads. They are slipping past most interception attempts, striking targets once considered safe. Each successful hit tears open another gap, another domino falling in a system never built for this sustained level of destruction. This arms race between offense and defense is as old as warfare itself, from the invention of the longbow to the development of stealth aircraft. All of this signals a risk far deeper than battlefield losses. The systematic destruction of infrastructure and logistics threatens the very fabric of Ukraine's society and governance. If the unraveling continues, the threat is not just to soldiers or politicians, but to the stability, resilience, and sovereignty of the nation itself. The world saw a similar unraveling in Libya, where the collapse of centralized infrastructure led to years of chaos and fragmentation. Ukraine faces a pivotal moment, forced to adapt under extraordinary pressure. The question now is how much more the country's systems, and its people, can endure before something irreparable breaks. The resilience of Ukrainian society is being tested as never before, recalling the spirit of Londoners during the Blitz, who endured nightly bombings but kept the city functioning through sheer determination. If you were asked to defend your homeland, where would you invest first? Into state-of-the-art missiles, or into the web of roads, rails, and power lines that quietly connect your entire society? This is no abstract dilemma. In the Second World War, the Soviet Union's ability to move factories east of the Urals, away from German bombers, was decisive in sustaining their war effort. Logistics and infrastructure are as vital as any weapon. Modern warfare is no longer just a contest of whose jets fly fastest or whose artillery strikes with the greatest accuracy. The real fight runs deeper, through the invisible arteries of a nation, its logistics, its power grids, and the collective will of its people. When these veins are cut, armies falter and cities dim, sometimes without a single enemy soldier crossing the border. The cyber attacks on Estonia in 2007 demonstrated how even a digital assault on infrastructure can paralyze a modern state. Ukraine's war has exposed just how fragile even a determined nation can become when its infrastructure is relentlessly targeted. Russian attacks have not depended solely on tanks and infantry. They have shattered rail junctions, struck power plants, and crippled supply depots with chilling precision. The effects ripple far beyond the front. When a hospital loses power, life-saving care collapses into chaos. When trains are halted, food and ammunition can no longer reach exhausted troops or desperate civilians. The lessons from Hurricane Katrina in the United States, where the breakdown of logistical support led to chaos and suffering, are a stark reminder that infrastructure underpins every aspect of survival. For years, military leaders and politicians trusted in sophisticated air defenses and the promise of Western technology. But this conflict has proven that even the most advanced systems can be overwhelmed by swarms of cheap drones, by sheer numbers, by the enemy's constant adaptation. Technology offers no easy fix. Overconfidence in gadgets leaves dangerous blind spots and breeds complacency. The Maginot Line in France was once considered impregnable, but was rendered obsolete by new tactics and technologies. What truly decides survival is redundancy and adaptability. Ukraine's experience reveals the power of backup generators, alternative routes, and quick response teams prepared to repair cables and tracks within hours. The capacity to improvise, to restore electricity, reroute supplies, rebuild shattered bridges, can keep a nation alive even under siege. Maintenance crews, not just soldiers, have become frontline defenders. In Israel, the rapid repair of infrastructure after missile strikes has been a key to maintaining civilian morale and military readiness. The human toll is immediate and merciless. Each blackout fans anxiety. Parents scramble to feed their children, hospitals are forced to ration care, and a slow, grinding isolation seeps into daily life. Psychological pressure is not merely a side effect. It is a weapon, eroding morale and undermining unity when daily existence becomes a struggle. The slow-burning stress of living under siege, as seen in Aleppo or Grozny, can be as damaging as any bomb. Those watching from afar must look past headlines about territory gained or lost. The real battle is measured in the steady flow of supplies, the hum of backup generators, and the endurance, or exhaustion, of those keeping the country running. Allies who ignore these silent struggles risk misjudging the war's true direction and making grave errors in their own defenses. The failure to appreciate logistics cost the United States dearly in Vietnam, when supply lines were vulnerable to both attack and sabotage. If we fail to internalize these lessons, our own societies remain exposed to similar catastrophic shocks. This is not only a Ukrainian crisis, it is a stark warning for every nation that believes strong armies alone are enough to guarantee survival. The blackout in New York City in 1977 demonstrated how quickly order can give way to chaos when infrastructure falters, even in peacetime. But what does this relentless pressure feel like on the ground? To understand, we need to follow the lifelines that keep a wounded country breathing, day after day. Imagine a mother in Kharkiv, huddled by candlelight, rationing bread as she waits for news of her husband at the front. Picture a railway worker in Dnipro, racing to repair a track before the next missile strike, knowing that a single delay could strand an entire brigade. Visualize the doctors in Lviv, improvising surgeries by flashlight, as backup generators groan under the load. These are not abstractions. They are the daily realities of war. Will the next disaster find us just as vulnerable, repeating the mistakes exposed by Ukraine's unraveling? The answer depends not only on military strength, but on the quiet investments we make in resilience, redundancy, and readiness. Right now, the decisive contest is not only measured in missiles or tanks. It unfolds in the dark, off the battlefield, woven through supply chains, power stations, rail lines, and the everyday machinery that keeps a country alive. Russian attacks on logistics hubs and critical infrastructure, paired with unrelenting psychological strain, have quietly eroded Ukraine's resilience more than any single advance or new weapon ever could. This is how modern war really works: slow, grinding, and catastrophic in ways the headlines often miss. When railways are severed, factories left idle, or power grids fail, entire regions descend into uncertainty. Soldiers cannot fight, civilians cannot endure, and hope itself becomes a casualty when the hidden nerves of national life are cut. With each lost bridge or blackout, Ukraine's ability to resist slips further away. This is the invisible front, one that is rarely photographed, but whose outcome will decide the fate of nations. The stakes are existential. For Ukraine, it is the looming specter of military defeat, economic collapse, and the loss of independence. Yet this warning ripples outward. Any nation that underestimates logistics, infrastructure, or morale risks being blindsided when crisis arrives. Whether it is war, natural disaster, or cyber attack, the first blows will land on these silent systems. The devastating earthquake in Japan in 2011, which crippled both civilian and military response, is a sobering parallel. This is why every policymaker, analyst, and citizen must look beyond the smoke and noise of combat. We must insist on transparency, readiness, and robust support for our logistical backbones, not after disaster, but now, while there is still time. History is merciless to those who missed the slow-motion collapse until it was too late to act. The lesson of Chernobyl, where delayed responses compounded tragedy, should not be forgotten. Will we heed Ukraine's warning, or let complacency blind us to the next threat waiting in the margins? The fate of nations may rest on how sharply we recognize where the true front lines have shifted. In the end, survival will belong not to the strongest, but to the most prepared, resilient, and adaptable. The time to act is before the next crisis, not after. Let this be the call to vigilance and the lesson we carry forward.